What's the most wildest way you accidentally caught someone cheating? Story 1. My wife refused to come home on a Friday night. We don't party, stay out late, or even drink alcohol. During our exchanges, she eventually claimed she was blowing off steam with some friends, had started drinking, and didn't feel safe to drive. She refused to tell me where she was so I could pick her up, and eventually stopped texting after saying, "We'll see each other in the morning and all will be fine." Naturally, I was confused and upset, and she could tell from our last messages. By 6 a.m., I was getting credit card alerts that a card was being used to withdraw large sums of cash. Later, I saw it had also been used at a store to buy some supplies. I immediately shut down that card and all the others. I rushed to the bank to move all our cash funds, and sure enough, $500 had just been withdrawn from another branch minutes earlier. After a week of texts pleading to work things out in any way possible, my wife finally agreed to meet for lunch. While there, she experienced a medical issue that required a visit to the ER. I, of course, offered to take her. Once we were in a room, the intake staff came in to double-check all her information. When a woman said, "And you must be Mike, her first to contact," I replied, "No, I'm Bob, her husband." The intake staff suddenly shut their computers and left the room. I took a few quiet minutes to choose my next words. "So who's this Mike?" That was the last time I saw her until we involved lawyers. 10 years later, she continues to bounce between towns, rentals, jobs, cars, friends, and men. I'm happily remarried, have a good job, and am on track for a well-funded retirement. Before we continue, do us a quick favor, smash that like button and subscribe to support our channel. Story 2. My friend was married for 10 years and decided to throw her husband a surprise 40th birthday party. She went all out with decorations, food, and drinks, and invited all his friends and family. To make sure he actually showed up, she asked his best friend to tell him there was just a casual get-together at his favorite spot, nothing fancy, so he wouldn't suspect anything. Well, the plan worked, sort of. He showed up, but he didn't walk in alone. He came strolling through the door with another woman on his arm, in front of his wife, his best friend, and literally everyone he knew. Story 3. My sister was 18 at the time and decided to skip school one random day. My grandpa, our legal guardian, usually went to work around 7 a.m., about an hour before she left for school. He left as normal that day, but maybe an hour later he came back. My sister ran outside to the backyard so he wouldn't catch her skipping class. She was sitting right outside his bedroom when a car pulled into the driveway. Minutes later, she heard my grandpa with a man. She said it lasted about 10 minutes, and then she watched the man walk back to his car and leave. She told my grandma and everyone else immediately. We all kind of wondered if it was true. No one had any evidence besides her story. Despite this, my grandma chose to believe her and left him. A few weeks later, my grandma returned to the house to get some of her things and saw the exact same vehicle my sister had described in the driveway. As she walked up to the front door, it opened, and a man was standing there zipping his pants. At that point, my grandma and the rest of us knew my sister had been telling the truth. My grandpa still denies it to this day. Story 4. In 2013, we had the kind of internet where, if you weren't careful, you'd end up exposing yourself no matter what you did. Social media was taking over. Facebook was the new superpower, and we even had it on our first or second generation smartphones. They were a big deal, especially in our small town. I've heard that one guy got out of bed and signed into Facebook to flirt with other girls while his girlfriend was sleeping. Then he went to the bathroom, still messaging on Facebook. The notifications rang on the phone and computer, waking his girlfriend. She read all the messages, waited for him to come out, and ran away in the morning rain. He chased her barefoot, following her nearly 3 miles on concrete with no shoes or socks in the rain. They eventually sat on a curb, talked it out, and tended to his sore feet together. It was a beautiful disaster. Both of them had a lot of growing to do, and you could never really say who had the wandering eye first, only that things got worse each time either of them was caught. The codependency that followed was fatal to the relationship. That kind of hurt doesn't just leave a person. Story 5. My friend's sister-in-law was cheating on her husband with my friend's brother. They only found out because her iCloud was logged into their child's iPad, and all of her photos and messages started appearing. My friend and his wife deleted everything and stayed out of it so the husband never found out. A year later, the brother suddenly and tragically passed away. The sister-in-law was devastated, far beyond what made sense to anyone else. But the husband assumed she was mourning a close family member. At the wake, she pulled my friend's mom aside to say something important, but my friend's mom shut her down, saying it could wait. On the first anniversary, the sister-in-law asked to go to the grave and lay down flowers with my friend and his wife. The husband finally asked why she was still grieving so intensely, since he didn't realize they had been that close. Before she could answer, their teenage daughter blurted out, "Dad, Mom was obviously sleeping with him. I have all the messages saved. She'd been logged into iCloud the whole time too." Last I heard, the husband was surprisingly calm after initially losing his temper. He basically told her he didn't care if she slept around as long as he was kept in the loop. Weirdly enough, that seemed to snap her back into line, and they're still together. Story 6. I used to work in a large office building owned by a huge corporation. Another office building in town, owned by the same company, was being remodeled, so engineers from that building were temporarily given workspace in ours. This meant that a co-worker's husband would be working in our building. Everything seemed very ordinary and professional. One day, the security guards reported to HR that the cameras in the parking lot had captured some inappropriate behavior. HR reviewed the footage and recognized the woman as my co-worker. Our very timid, soft-spoken HR guy called her and her husband into HR for a meeting. He basically told them, "Hey, this is no big deal, but please don't do it in the parking lot. People can see you." The husband denied any involvement and was so adamant that the HR guy pulled up the video. "That's not me," said the husband. And indeed, it wasn't. It was my co-worker and her boss in the family car while the husband was working inside. The husband lost his mind and demanded that both his wife and her boss be fired, which they were. Story 7. This was back during my degree. I was put in a group with two girls I'd never really spoken to before. We were just chatting, and the topic of partners came up. One girl started talking about her partner who was in the army and had recently returned, and how they were going to move in together. She mentioned that he had met up with some friends at a local club that night. I said, "No way. My mate recently met a guy in that same club who was in the army. I wonder if they're friends." I was naive and very wrong. The girl asked his name. I had forgotten, so I messaged my mate. It turned out to be the same name as her boyfriend. Feeling awkward and needing to explain to my mate why I was asking about a random hookup, I told the girl it's a pretty common name. The screenshots from my mate's Tinder and from the girl showing her boyfriend confirmed it was the same guy. It turned out he had told my mate that he was single and that his last relationship had ended a while ago. Then he tried to tell his girlfriend that my mate had come on to him, and he said all sorts of derogatory things about her. The last time I spoke to the girl, she was still with him. I don't remember what the group work was about, but I'll never forget that awkward conversation. Story 8. A former supervisor was sleeping with one of my coworkers. Everyone who worked there knew it was the worst kept secret in the whole building. One day, I was helping a new customer with a purchase when his side piece came out screaming my name and threatening to kick my butt. I held my arms up to protect my face and yelled, "Why does she want to kick my butt?" I literally had no idea what was going on. He ran out to calm her down. Apparently, his wife had the same first name as me, and we had similar coloring. I guess she thought we looked alike or something. My new customer, whom I was helping, turned out to be his wife shopping for his birthday gift. The side piece then tried to fight the wife right there on the floor, in front of the supervisor, publicly. Because of the encounter, I was stuck between the two as he tried to drag the side piece away. The kicker is that he had filed complaints against everyone who worked on that floor for spreading rumors, trying to ruin his marriage, and get him fired just a week before this all happened. Story 9. I was dating a girl for about 2 years. She had moved to a city roughly 45 minutes away for a nursing job and a part-time barista gig. I finished college and moved to the same city after she had been there for about 6 months. Once I moved, I noticed some strange behavior, and we were spending noticeably less time together despite living in the same city. She had also become very close with a coworker at her coffee shop, who did photography on the side. She mentioned he offered to do a free shoot for her, and I let it happen because I didn't think much of it. Around this time, I had graduated from college a week after moving and had just started my new job. On my first Friday at work, I opened my laptop to see a ton of missed calls from a random woman and messages asking if I was her boyfriend. I answered immediately and called her back. She informed me that her husband, the photographer, had been sleeping with my girlfriend for about 6 months and that she had caught him at my girlfriend's apartment. I thanked her for letting me know and immediately left work to break up with her. When I confronted her, I asked how this had been happening behind my back. She said they had been using WhatsApp so I would never find out. Unfortunately, when she showed me their text thread, it included all of the photos from the photo shoot, dozens of images of them in the same bed I used to sleep in. Safe to say I have some trust issues after that one. Story 10. A friend of a friend couple had been married for about 10 years and lived in a large house in Delaware. One night they got into a fight, and the wife decided to leave. Instead of going home, she went to an apartment they owned in DC. She worked long hours there and would sometimes crash at the apartment to avoid traffic. The next morning, the husband felt bad about the fight. He grabbed flowers and breakfast and headed to the DC apartment. When he walked in, he found his wife in her underwear in bed with the coworker he had been told not to worry about. The husband was furious and stormed out. The wife tried to insist that nothing had happened, The coworker who was friendly said she had just come over because the wife was upset and that she needed to sleep in the same bed to make her feel comfortable. She had no explanation for why she was undressed. The husband returned to the apartment to hear her out, and upon actually looking around, he found tons of painkillers. She had been taking those as well. He asked for a divorce and fled the country to Thailand. While there, he met a woman he now calls the love of his life and literally proposed within weeks. He came back over the moon, talking about bringing her home to live in his large house. The only problem was that she couldn't get a US visa, but she could get one for Japan. Now he's living there with her, playing husband and wife after knowing each other for about 2 months. We're all trying to be supportive, but honestly, we're just waiting for the inevitable crash. Story 11. I was living abroad, but I heard through the grapevine that my friend was getting cheated on. He wasn't working, claimed to be depressed, had drug-free tattooed on his knuckles, and constantly said he didn't want to be like his dad, a tattooed jerk. He was exactly that. My friend paid his rent for a few months, even though he only slept over a few times a week. Then our mutual connection messaged me to say she had seen her boyfriend on Tinder. She confronted our friend with the screenshots. "Oh, that's his old account. He just hasn't used it in a while. That's why it's still up," he said. A different friend found his profile again, got an idea, and swiped. He instantly matched with her and started chatting. My friend threw up excuses again, but she was understandably triggered. This girl made a fake Tinder account and set the range so only he would show up. She matched with him, and he started chatting away. He asked for her Snapchat, and when he added her on her fake account, he somehow saw her email address and realized it was her. He freaked out. She felt vindicated that she had caught him while he started threatening to harm himself. It turned out my friend would roll out of the bed sheets she had paid for in the place she paid rent, go to work for 8 hours, and another girl would roll right into those sheets just because he was lonely. Story 12. My ex-husband was in the military. He constantly smoked with some of his army buddies, and I kept telling him, "You're going to get caught one of these days, and it won't be good." Well, he did. He failed a urinalysis and was charged with possession. They sent him to military confinement. He told his family the story that he'd been in a flag football game, got into a fight with a lieutenant, and that's why he was sent away. While he was gone, his loudmouthed cousin posted on my ex's Facebook wall, ranting that this was unfair and that the lieutenant should pay. I told his mom what really happened, and she asked me to hack into his account to delete the post before he got into even more trouble. When I got into his account, I decided to check his message inbox. It turned out he was sleeping with my best friend at the time, behind my back. They were even dating, and as it came to light, they slept with each other in our own house one night while I was drunk and throwing up in the next bathroom over. She had come to check on me and then went back into the next room to be with him. He eventually got kicked out of the army, one step above a dishonorable discharge, which I wish he had actually received. He was a pathological liar. I once caught him messaging a girl on Facebook, claiming he had been to Afghanistan. I wrote her back and said, "Unless I've been in a coma for the last 2 years, this man has never been to war." Story 13. My roommate's ex cheated on her once. He was a super jealous psycho. One day she had lunch with a male coworker, and he became so jealous and convinced she was cheating that he downloaded Tinder, found a girl, and went to a park with her to do the deed. My friend was working an evening shift and was going to be picked up and dropped off that night. While she was at work, I was at home hanging out with another friend. My friend got a call from someone else who had gotten a ride home with a teammate after soccer. During the car ride, the teammate had a call come through on speakerphone. Small world. The teammate was a good friend of my friend's boyfriend. Over speaker, the boyfriend detailed what he had just done and how he regretted it, but he was still angry because she had gone to lunch with a male colleague. My friend in the car realized, "Wait, I know her." He then called my friend to tell her what happened and had the teammate drop him off at my place. We sat there waiting for her to come home from work and greeted her with the worst surprise ever. She had been cheated on, and our friend had overheard the entire confession by chance. He was a scary and manipulative guy, so I'm glad they broke up and she was able to move on before things got worse. It was really just luck that she found out when she did. Story 14. Back in the spring of 2001, I was a freshman in high school. I was mostly minding my own business in a world geography class. Things were chill until they weren't. I honestly don't remember what exactly set it off. There was a kid in the back of the class who started yelling at the teacher. At first, it was basic stuff, just telling him that he sucked. The verbal insults went on for a bit, and both the student and the teacher began getting more aggressive. At this point, the teacher was still behind their desk, and the student was still in the back of the room. No one in that classroom knew what was about to happen. After about 3 minutes of yelling at each other, the student suddenly stood up and shouted, "Yeah, well, that's why I've been banging your wife." At that moment, the teacher's face went pale, all the color draining out, and then in a split-second turnaround, he turned beet red. While the teacher's face was changing colors, the student moved from the back of the classroom and charged toward him. The next thing the class knew, the student and the teacher were beating the crap out of each other. One of the girls in the class ran to get the principal. It took the principal and a few members of the football team to separate the student and the teacher. I remember turning to one of my best guy friends and saying, "That is so crazy. That kid is going to get suspended. I can't believe he said that. I never thought the kid was telling the truth." Every student in the room assumed he was just talking out of his rear, but he wasn't. He had been sleeping with the teacher's wife for a few months. That was confirmed to us the next day in class. Our teacher wasn't there, and we were given a brief explanation of what had been going on. The teacher eventually returned to class. To say he was salty would be an understatement. That poor man did well just to finish out the school year. We never saw that kid in that class again, and I have no idea what happened to him. Story 15. I had been dating my then boyfriend for around 2.5 years, and we were talking about getting engaged. When we first started dating, I knew he was a playboy. I decided to break things off after a few months of casually seeing each other because I didn't want to be just one of many girls. He told me he was done with that lifestyle and just wanted to be with me. Ignoring all the red flags, I agreed. Everything seemed great for the next couple of years, and we planned a big trip to Orlando's Universal Studios and a week-long Caribbean cruise. The trip was amazing. We even looked at rings during the cruise, but I couldn't decide on one I really liked. Everything was perfect until the night before we were meant to fly home. I am a very anxious traveler, so I couldn't sleep the night before our flight. I decided to grab the SD card from his camera and download the photos from our trip onto my laptop while he was sleeping. While going through the photos, I came across a video from a few months earlier. The camera was hidden in his closet with a clear view of his bed. At first, I thought maybe he had recorded us without telling me, but when he came into the room, he was followed by another girl. I watched enough to know he had cheated on me. I woke him up at 3 a.m. and broke it off then and there. He, of course, tried to deny it, but the video was timestamped and clearly showed the birthday present I had given him a week or so before. I later found out that he had cheated on me with multiple women throughout our relationship. A few months later, I met the man who is now my husband. So I have to thank my ex for being a complete idiot and leaving video evidence. Otherwise, I wouldn't have the wonderful life I have now. Story 16. My friend was going through flight training to become a commercial pilot. He was married at the time. One day, he got a notification from his Ring security camera at home. When he checked the live feed, he saw his wife cheating on him with a woman. He was beyond devastated, wondering what went wrong. His wife told him straight up, "I fell out of love with you a while ago, sorry." They had been married for 5 years at that point and shared a house, dogs, cats, and all the typical couple stuff. He tried to salvage the marriage through counseling and everything else, clinging to denial. At that point, she still had some residual feelings for him, but they were fading. Eventually, his wife handed him divorce papers and left to marry the woman she had cheated on him with. She just grabbed her personal belongings and her 2 dogs, leaving him alone in the same house where the betrayal had happened. I don't know how this man managed to keep it together, but somehow he did. He mentioned multiple times how he would drive himself to work and just cry in his car, feeling like a failure as a husband. He replayed all the signs he had missed of her falling out of love and blamed himself for causing her to cheat. He also began drinking heavily. As of now, he is in a much better place mentally. He cut back on his drinking and is fully focused on becoming a good pilot and eventually earning captain status. I'm proud of him. Story 17. This was a man in northern Alberta who had a gut feeling his fiancée was messing around. He couldn't prove it himself, so he hired a PI to look into it. It turned out she had been sleeping with his best friend pretty often for about 20 years. The homewrecker was also slated to be the best man at the wedding. He'd borrowed money from his aunt to pay the investigator. She worried he was gambling or using drugs because he made good money, and she didn't know why he needed cash. He didn't want withdrawals showing up in his account. He needed it untraceable. He stayed quiet because he had a finale planned. Fast forward to the wedding day. Before rings could be exchanged and papers signed, he stood up and, while both families were present, asked everyone to check under their chairs for an envelope he had taped there the night before. Inside was a picture the investigator had taken, showing the fiancé with the best friend clearly caught in the act. The embarrassment on the faces of the cheater and the best friend was unforgettable, or so I was told. I wouldn't have the patience for something like this, but this man sought blood and I commend him for it. Story 18. When my older sister was around 10 months old and my mom was pregnant with me, she found out my dad was cheating on her. The whole family found out when my Uncle John came home early from work and found his wife, my mom's sister, Martha, and my dad packing the car with my sister and cousin to leave. Uncle John called my grandparents first, and before long, everyone was there. And because my family just cannot be normal, I was born within 60 days of all this drama going down. We're Roman Catholic, so naturally, I was baptized before the end of the year. You'll never believe who my godparents were, Uncle John and Aunt Martha. Aunt Martha also gave birth to her second and last child 6 months after the affair came out, which makes me suspect what prompted the getaway attempt. Uncle John and Aunt Martha didn't get divorced for another 20 years for reasons I cannot possibly fathom. My parents didn't get divorced until 6 years later, although they had separated some time before, but not before having another child. I have a full sister who was born 2 years and 8 months after me. Story 19. I had 2 friends in high school. Sisters. Their dad was a police detective, and their mom was a bus driver, so they often worked odd, sometimes opposite hours. One day, their dad had a heart attack while on the job and was rushed to the hospital. It took a while for their mom to get there because they had a hard time reaching her, but she eventually arrived. When she walked into the room, another woman was already there. Mom asked, "Who are you?" The woman replied, "Who are you?" Mom said, "Well, I'm his wife and I think you need to leave." Mom quickly realized who the woman was. The girlfriend, not as sharp, said, "Well, I'm his girlfriend, and I have a right to be here too." Mom was firm. "No, you don't. Leave now if you know what's good for you." Security got involved, and the girlfriend left. Dad was alive, but not in great condition. He eventually recovered, but was left with a permanent disability from the heart attack and was not in great shape. He ended up taking early retirement, as he could no longer do the job. His wife, of course, filed for divorce in the wake of this. Dad moved in with the girlfriend, but that lasted only about 6 months. She realized he had far less money to spend on her now, and he required too much care in his weakened condition. She left, presumably to home wreck some other couple. Dad was left alone in a shabby apartment, living off his pension, completely isolated since his daughters wanted nothing to do with him. This man had pretty much lost everything. Story 20. My first girlfriend had been groomed from a young age and was still in contact with him online when we started dating. He even convinced her to stream our first intimate experiences to him. Neither of us ever believed in anything mystical, but we used to do tarot readings just for fun. For some reason though, for months of daily readings, every time we did one for her, the same tarot card would show up, a woman bound and surrounded by a cage of swords. It was uncanny. It happened so consistently that I became obsessed with figuring out why. I wondered if the card had been marked somehow or if there was some trick to it, but she always seemed to avoid talking about it. It turned out the tarot deck my ex used hadn't come from a random store at all. She'd gotten it from the man who groomed her on the one occasion they met in person. He essayed her during that meeting. Despite the deck supposedly being sealed every time it was in his room, somehow that specific card, the one with the bound woman in a cage of swords, ended up under his hotel bed after she left. He had to send it back to her later. That card kept appearing, day after day, no matter how we shuffled. I was caught between fascination and unease, convinced there had to be some trick. My obsession with figuring out why it always turned up eventually became too much. It made her feel so guilty that she finally confessed she'd been seeing him online the whole time and told me everything about what had happened. Story 21. A friend of mine got married. She didn't have a family to give her away, so I ended up being both the maid of honor and the hired MC at their wedding. It was a lovely celebration in a New England nautical town. The groom had a huge Greek family, and everything about them seemed like a green flag. They all loved me too. Sadly, it was all a ruse. 2 years into the marriage, she got sick, and her gynecologist told her she had HPV. She had tested clean at her last exam. It turned out her husband had been sleeping around with Craigslist hookups. Worse, not only did his co-workers know, but the entire family knew as well. The whole family had been part of the cover-up. Something about a man's right to virility, or an old-world philosophy along the lines of, all the women know their men have a side piece. She was left sick and dealing with her husband's betrayal. It ended in a quick divorce, and the family turned vicious on her. She had to move several states away to start a new life. Story 22. The only time I know of that I was cheated on was when my ex, who was 24 at the time, slept with a 19-year-old. He had been talking to her online for 3 months, knew her age, and went to meet her in a county 2 hours away. I thought he was at some job training he had told me about that day. I found out when I turned on the news that evening and his picture popped up in the corner. That messed me up for a very long time, and I struggled with trust issues. He and his mother blamed me for his actions, claiming I spent too much time with our son and not enough attention on him. Our son was on a feeding tube and IV. I took care of all of that daily with no help, so of course I spent the majority of my time with the baby. Story 23. My dad, Bob, was dating his best friend's wife, Marcy. I was about 8 years old at the time, so don't come after me. One day he gave me his old phone. While going through it, I saw he was sending flirty messages to Susie. I asked him about it while we were with Marcy, and he shushed me, telling me to just reset the phone. Bob has always been a compulsive liar. I've never trusted him with anything. He constantly claims that women throw themselves at him or want to have kids with him. It's weird. Also, my parents are divorced, so some days I'm with mom and some days I'm with dad. One day, he tells me he has a girlfriend, Susie, in Mexico. I don't believe him. Over the next few years, he talks about her here and there, but I never see her, so of course I don't believe him. Then he tells me they're engaged. Sure, Dad. He says he's going to Mexico to bring Susie to America and tells me to feed the dogs while he's gone. When I go to feed the dogs, I find a note on the door that Marcy left. Thanks for making me and my son wait for you for 2 hours at some restaurant. Just then, Marcy calls me. She asks where Bob is, and I tell her he left for Mexico 2 days ago. What? What did he tell you exactly? She asks. I explain he told me to feed the dogs and that he left on Tuesday to bring home his alleged fiancée. He's bringing her now? She says. I stay quiet. She hangs up. A few days later, when he was supposed to come back, I had just gotten home from school to my mom. I got a phone call from Marcy. Can I go to your house? I have to talk to you. I was weirded out that an adult wanted to vent to me, a middle schooler. I asked my mom to stay with me in the living room when Marcy arrived. Marcy entered, acting like she was crying. She sounded upset, but there were no tears. She told me she wanted to confront Bob. She explained that she wanted to meet him at their usual spot. While he would drive there, she would drive to his house, where he would have dropped off Susie. Marcy had a key to our house. She walked in, went straight to Bob's room, and put her finger to her lips in a be quiet gesture to Susie. Susie looked shocked. She had been unpacking her luggage when Marcy walked in. Marcy says, I know you brought Susie. How could you? I know I have a husband, but you know he doesn't mean anything to me. How could you cheat on me and bring her here? Do you love her more than me? Is that why you're engaged? He replies, I don't love her at all. She means nothing to me. I don't even find her attractive. This is purely for papers. She's paying me so she can get her green card. She's staying in another room. I don't even want to touch her. I was going to tell you at our spot. Imagine how my stepmom felt. She had just arrived and was hearing her fiancé say all of this. The first person she met was his side piece, being degraded and accused. She hadn't even wanted to move to America. She had told him she was fine with the long distance because she wanted to stay with her family in Mexico. He had been begging her to come over for more than a year. Marcy and Bob are arguing. Susie is silently crying when Bob gets to their usual spot and realizes Marcy isn't there. You're at my house, aren't you? He says, and hangs up. Susie and Marcy are talking inside the house. Bob enters, opens the bedroom door, and leans against the doorway. Why did you have to do this, Marcy? He asks. She yells at him, pushes him, and leaves the house. Bob stares at Susie, says nothing, and then runs after Marcy. Marcy was sobbing, her first day here, and this happened. She said what hurt her most was that Bob chose to run after Marcy instead of comforting her. She just waited for him to come back. He said he had ended things. Marcy had explained what happened and then left my house. Later, Susie told me her side too. Unfortunately, he never stopped cheating with Marcy. And worse, my stepmom never left. It went on for years of him cheating on Susie with Marcy. Marcy didn't care. I spent my entire childhood trying to help Susie leave, but she always dug in her heels, insisting they would work things out. I ran away at 17 because I was exhausted by the constant drama and fights. He ended up kicking her and my eventual stepsister out and moved in with a different side piece. Again, he cheated on her and kicked her out for another side piece. He moved Susie and my stepsister back in, only to kick them out for a different side piece. Then he kicked that side piece out for yet another side piece. Story 24. At 19, I was dating a woman long distance, and we decided to meet up for a road trip to San Francisco with a few of my friends. I was staying in a hostel and made friends with a group of guys in the next room over, with whom we would drink, as one of them was 21 and could buy alcohol. I went out with a couple of the guys to try to find a store that would sell us beer, while she stayed behind. It took a while to get some more 40s, and by the time I got back, I couldn't find my girlfriend. One of the guys loaned me his key so I could check if she was in their room. It turns out she was riding one of their friends. We locked eyes. She squeaked and pulled the blankets over her head, pretending I hadn't just seen her going full cowgirl. In the most melodramatic display of teenage emotion, I ended up walking around San Francisco, drinking a 40 of King Cobra, and crying for the rest of the night. It was a very awkward road trip home. Story 25. Last week, my truck got hit while it was parked in front of my house, and the driver ran. I was actually home, working on some drywall when it happened. A police report was filed, and I made a Facebook post that I shared with a few crime watch groups in my town. I was able to partially identify the car that hit me and included that information with a decent reward. 2 days went by, and then over the weekend, I got a message to call this guy. He said, I just saw your post and I know who hit your truck. It was my wife. He went on, She didn't tell me, and I didn't notice anything since it has an off-road grill, but I went and looked and it's bent back. I confronted her and she admitted it to me. I was still a little confused and felt owed some explanation. I asked him what she was doing on my street since I live about 3 turns off the main artery. Basically, unless you live in the neighborhood, there's no reason to drive past my house. His response was, well, to be honest, this caused us to split up. I think she was seeing someone she shouldn't have been. What a way to find out your wife was cheating on you. But I now understand why she didn't want insurance or police to document her location. Story 26. My first wife passed away in 2019 at the age of 43. She had a best friend who was so close that they'd fly out to see each other no matter where the husbands were stationed. Eventually, he and I retired and we settled in Texas, while they stayed in Louisiana. About a year later, my wife found out that the best friend's husband had been thrown out, they divorced, and she had moved on. What led to this? A few years back, before retirement, they had become friends with another couple who were rather more forward than they were. During that year after retirement, the other couple and the best friend's husband had slowly coerced her to take boudoir pictures and get comfortable with the idea of playing around. She had no idea, other than that her husband's attitude toward intimacy had radically changed. He had not only been happily participating in 3-way play with them, but all pictures of his wife had been shared with the other partners without her knowledge. Apparently, all of this was supposed to lead up to a drunken swingers party, which she only discovered because he didn't bother deleting texts and emails on a shared desktop at home. Story 27. Marriage had been on the rocks for the past year, as I dealt with my wife's lack of engagement and repeated lies about making changes. The only thing that changed was how much she drank to avoid communication and responsibilities. We separated last December, and she requested marriage counseling at the end of that month. The sessions were scheduled to begin at the start of January. We started attending separately, and that weekend, the Amazon Alexa in the home she no longer lived in showed a yellow notification light. The notification was for a completed delivery of an emergency contraceptive. She had never been good with technology and had completely forgotten to unlink her Amazon account. When confronted, she admitted it was basically a drunken one-night stand. She even said it was cheaper than Walmart, and that maybe we'll laugh about this in the future. I provided proof to my lawyer, and considering the cost of the divorce so far, I'd say the Walmart choice would have been considerably cheaper. 12 years destroyed in a month. Alcoholism is wild. Life is getting better though. I landed a dream job shortly afterward, which also created a conflict of interest with her lawyer and caused them to withdraw from the case. Literal lottery-level odds, really. Now finally, there's something we can actually laugh about in the future. Story 28. My siblings and I found out that our dad had been cheating on his first wife. My dad worked for the Belgian government at various embassies in West Africa, which meant he spent a lot of time away from home. His first wife and my 2 half-brothers lived there full-time until the oldest started kindergarten, after which they only stayed during summer vacations. So, the last time the whole family lived together full-time was in 1987. In the years that followed, my dad and his first wife split up. He met my mom at a party she was working at, though I only knew my mom's side of the story for a long time. He got officially divorced in late 1993 and married my mom in 1994, just 5 months before I was born. My dad passed away when I was 10. I still saw my brothers and their mom fairly often, and she was always kind to my sister and me. We'd have sleepovers at their house, and she'd remember our favorite dishes and little things like that. It wasn't until after she passed away herself in 2016 that I learned the full story about their side of things. My eldest brother had taken possession of all our stepmom's belongings and was going through them. My sister and I came to visit and were staying with him when he started telling us about how, to his surprise, she had held on to all the correspondence between our dad and her. He was reading through the letters and said they were kind of sad. Most didn't say anything remarkable beyond the usual "I love you," but she had kept them in a special box and treasured them for decades. Out of one of the piles, he randomly fished out some letters and handed one to each of us to read. My sister's letter was more of the same, full of updates about work, plans for when they might see each other again, and everyday life. My letter started off normally enough. "Thank you for your previous letter. I've been recovering from malaria, as you know, and it has been terrible, but I am coping. How are you and the boys?" A few lines in, however, the tone shifted dramatically. "It is my birthday today, and like every year, I've sent you a letter. I do want to tell you I don't love you anymore and haven't for a long time. I thought you should know. The truth is, I can't keep it to myself any longer, since it wouldn't be fair to me and to the woman I currently love." I'm paraphrasing, but that was essentially the grand scheme of the letter. I was shocked, so shocked in fact, that my brother immediately asked what was wrong. I started reading the letter aloud to him. He remained calm, just curious, and asked what the date on the letter was. It was dated in 1989, incidentally, my birthday. I said so, half in surprise, and my brother added, "And his birthday," at which point I remembered the part in the letter where he mentions it himself. I've always loved my birthday. It felt extra special to share it with my dad, maintaining that connection even after he passed. But on his own birthday, he had callously and selfishly broken the heart of this woman, taking her completely by surprise. It hadn't even been 3 months since they last saw each other, and I assume he had acted normally enough during that time. I later learned that my dad had held a bride price ceremony for my mom sometime that year, so I wonder if that event had prompted him to finally confess the truth. Story 29. I worked at a large grocery chain in the Northeast. Every year we ran a promotion. If you spent $300 during October and November, you'd get a free turkey. Purchases were tracked through your Price Plus card, and it didn't matter which store you shopped at, you earned points every time you shopped. Once you hit the required amount, you could redeem it for a turkey, but only one per card. Once it was redeemed, that was it. There was no way to get another. Part of my job involved resolving issues at the cash register, and every Thanksgiving season we'd get a flood of people with problems, usually because they didn't realize they had already redeemed their turkey. Because points could be earned or redeemed at any store, I could take your card, pull up your history in our system, and see exactly where and when you earned points and when you spent them. I had access to every order you had ever made across all our stores. Just before Thanksgiving, a woman came in to get her free turkey, and it wasn't coming off. Standard procedure. I took her Price Plus card to the computer and looked it up. There were a ton of orders from upstate, which wasn't unusual since our store was in a touristy area. I told her the turkey had already been redeemed. She immediately started arguing, insisting she had never redeemed it. So I brought her over to my computer and showed her it had been redeemed at a store in northern New Jersey. She stared at it, silent. Then she blurted out, "That cheating piece of crap." Apparently her husband's girlfriend lived up there, and he, or maybe the girlfriend, had gone shopping and redeemed the turkey. She didn't scream or throw a fit, she just quietly paid for her groceries, including the turkey, beet red from embarrassment. I asked my coworkers if they'd ever seen anything like that, and they said it had happened a few times. Story 30. I found out my long-ago ex-girlfriend was cheating in the most brutal way imaginable. I walked into her bedroom and saw her awkwardly draped over a man, struggling to get off him. Must have been a fall she didn't plan. I had been at school late, studying for an exam until I hit a wall and couldn't focus anymore. She worked at a dive bar on the north side of town and was supposed to be at work that night. Our apartments were close, hers closer to school, and I had a key. Figuring she wouldn't be home, I headed over to crash and maybe make dinner for her later. Her roommate had weird hours, so I snuck in quietly. The first thing I heard were noises. I thought, the roommate must be having fun. Then I realized it was my girlfriend, and it wasn't her roommate. Then I realized the noises were coming from my girlfriend's room. Lights out. I quietly opened the door, walked in, and flipped on the light. Total shock on everyone's face. She jumps off, and the guy lunges at me, but he's probably 55, 60 years old. I'm 27, she's 25. He stumbles, crashing face first into the wall hard enough to put a hole in the sheetrock, not unconscious but dazed and bleeding. She's crying, babbling, "It's not what it looks like. I'm sorry." I just toss her the key, bail, and ghost her. We have mutual friends. It turns out the man was a part owner of the bar where she worked, and they had been seeing each other for a couple of weeks. In short, she tried to get a better job by sleeping with the boss, ended up dumped, didn't get the job, broke up the boss's marriage, and contracted an STI. Thankfully, I tested negative. Story 31. My best friend is an only child. He lost both of his parents before he even started high school and was raised by his grandmother. When she passed away, he was living alone in the family house. Later, he started dating a girl, and the relationship became serious. A few years into dating, he sold the house to move to the city with her. I was always happy for him, seeing him find what looked like true happiness. 3 to 4 years later, they broke up. He said they realized they weren't really compatible. Fast forward to last year, my friend finally told me the real story. A couple of years after their breakup, I don't know how he never told anyone before. Apparently, whenever they went out, there was often a guy from the girl's work tagging along. They went on double dates and the like. Later, when that guy had a girlfriend too, the 4 of them went out one weekend. The guy got extremely drunk and went to the bathroom, and my friend's girlfriend followed him. When my friend confronted her, asking, "Yo, what the heck?" she called him names, saying he was overreacting when she was just worried about a colleague. A week later, the guy's girlfriend texted my friend, revealing that the 2 of them had been messing around for a while. My friend and the girl broke up. A couple of months later, the girl was pregnant with the guy's child. My friend is still deeply depressed, feeling like he threw his family heirloom out the window for her, losing all his roots. I'm worried about him as well. The last time we spoke, he said some troubling things while drunk. Story 32. There were 6 of us in a small WhatsApp group. I usually went to bed by 10, so I often missed the late-night chats and would catch up the next morning. One morning, I opened the group and saw that most of the messages from the night before had been deleted. From the few that remained, I could tell that my boyfriend had been mocking one of our mutual friends for not having slept with his girlfriend yet. Several pictures had also been sent, but those were gone as well. When I asked him about it, he brushed it off, saying it was just boys' talk and nothing important. That same day, he reassured me that once he got his job, he would talk to my parents about marrying me. Yet his behavior toward me never changed. For 2 years, he would ghost me for weeks at a time, only to reappear for a day or two, never taking responsibility for how he treated me. About a month later, I was crying again about the situation and confided in another friend from the group, someone who thought of me like a sister. That's when he finally told me the truth. He had saved all the screenshots and pictures from the group before they were deleted. The messages were full of sensual texts, screenshots, and pictures of girls my boyfriend had hooked up with in recent months, along with a few videos. It was devastating. He liked to brag about it. He wasn't even drunk, just arrogant, thinking I would never find out. It turned out he had been cheating on me the entire time he had known me. Story 33. My boyfriend at the time and I had lived together for almost 2 years. When one day he suddenly told me he needed space, he started leaving the house late at night and returning several hours later. I had my suspicions, but whenever I brought it up, he denied everything, of course. We ended up fighting about it, and he said he needed a break from me. Yet we still lived together and slept in the same bed because it was the only one we had. The next day, he told me about his new girlfriend, whom he had apparently been seeing for the past few days. He spoke about her as if I should be happy for him. I told him I didn't even know we were broken up. He insisted that we had been. I kicked him out that night, telling him I didn't care where he went. I still have no idea what was going through his mind. Story 34. I recently found out that as a toddler, I had apparently discovered my dad with my mom's friend in the living room fold-out bed. He was caught because I was crying, and I had always been a very quiet, well-behaved child, so my mom came out to check on me, thinking I just needed a bottle or something. She kicked him out immediately and never spoke to the friend again. I admire her for keeping all of that under wraps for 30 years. For those thinking it's wrong that she shared this now, it's actually very insightful for me. I never knew why they had divorced. I was told they remained friends, and my dad was rarely in the picture afterward, so it didn't seem to matter. I haven't spoken to my dad privately since I found out. Story 35. On Christmas Day, my mom walked in to find my dad sitting there in his running shorts, emailing a woman he actually worked with. She looked at the screen and said, "What the heck is this?" He didn't even try to make an excuse. "Oh, I guess you caught me." Without missing a beat, she replied, "Dinner's ready." My parents never really talked much anyway, so it still felt like a normal day unless they were just that good at keeping their issues under wraps until after school started following winter break. A friend of mine was in the middle of making supper when her now ex-husband told her he was seeing someone else and wanted a divorce. There was nothing she could do to save the marriage. It was over. She told me later that she went right back to making supper because all she could think was, "We still have to eat." She was so shocked and blindsided that her conscious mind felt frozen, so she continued on autopilot with their daily routine. When I found out my father had ended his life, I immediately became the most rational and productive person, informing people about the funeral, figuring out what needed to be done, and so on. It felt very strange to others because the rest of my family was in shock while I appeared quite normal. Later, I learned that my brain was trying to focus on things it could control, since it couldn't accept that I had no control over the fact that my dad was gone. Story 36. My girlfriend's childhood best friend was visiting us from the United States. We planned our Anime North weekend around her trip, since she and my girlfriend hadn't been to a con in ages because of university. I was basically there as the cosplay arm candy. Nothing major happened at the con itself, but the IndyCar Toronto race was the same week. On our way out, I convinced them to make a quick detour to a small IndyCar merchandise booth by the stadium because, well, I wanted some merch. And guess who we ran into there? Her best friend's cheating ex, the one who had been carrying on a long-term affair. It turned out he had been gifted tickets by his affair partner. What are the odds? They ended up having a little argument there, but honestly, the whole scene felt like a scripted season finale. If we had decided to grab food first, we never would have crossed paths. My random obsession with checking out the merchandise booth was literally the only reason we found out. We canceled our zoo trip the next day and instead let the girls have a spa day and get drunk watching reality TV, which they kindly let me join while I worked on art commissions. Thankfully, the best friend is now with someone much better. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you never miss an update.